Hello everyone, in this video we will build a to-do application using PostgreSQL, Express, React and Node.js, also known as the PERN Stack. We will use pgAdmin to manage and visualize our PostgreSQL database, Postman to test and verify our API, and React with Node.js to connect everything into a complete application. And here is the exciting part. By the end, you will see exactly how data moves from the user's screen through the backend into the database and back again. So make sure to watch until the end. You don't want to miss how it all comes together. Okay guys, now let's create two folders, backend and frontend. Okay, and now let's open our terminal by pressing Ctrl and backtick, and let's go to the backend folder. And now let's initialize a new Node.js project by saying npm init -y. -y means that we want to accept the default settings. So let's press enter and it will give us a file called package.json. Okay, now if we open backend folder, as you can see, we have this file. Now we need to install the following dependencies. So let's say npm install express. It's our main framework, so it will provide routing, middleware support and more. Then let's also install pg. So this is the library that allows our Node.js code to speak the language of PostgreSQL. So it's the adapter that lets our power drill, which is Express, connect to the database socket. And let's also install cores. So our React frontend will run on localhost 5173 and our Express backend on localhost 5000. And they are different origins. So cores is a middleware that tells the browser it's okay. The server at port 5000 allows requests from port 5173. In a nutshell, our backend and frontend will be able to talk to each other. So let's install these dependencies. So now, as you can see, we have node models and also package-log.json file. And inside this file, we also see the dependencies that we have just installed. And we can install one more dependency, which will be a dev dependency. So let's say npm install nodemon. And I want to install it as a dev dependency. So that's why I write dash and capital D. So it's a utility that automatically restarts our Node.js server whenever it detects a change in our files. So let's install it. And as you can see, now we have dev dependencies and inside we have nodemon. Great. Now inside backend folder, we can create a file called index.js. You can call it app.js or server.js, but I want to say index.js. So it will be the server, which is like the receptionist. So this file is the entry point, the first thing that runs. Now, here I want to say import express from express, but right now this syntax isn't available to me. Only this syntax is available to me, which is by default. So only this one. But I don't want to use this syntax. I want to use this syntax. To be able to use this syntax, I need to come here and say the following. So here I can say type, and I want it to be module. So let's save it. And now I can use this syntax. Now let's create an instance of an Express application by saying const app will be equal to express. And let's say that on the home page, on the root, we want to have the following message, which will be hello world. So here, as you can see, the path will be the root. And then we have request object and response object. So request is what comes to us from our client and response is how we respond to that request. So when we visit the home page, we want to see this message, okay? And now let's say that our application will listen on the port, which will be 5000. And then in the console, we can show this message, which is server is listening on port 5000. Now we have a very basic structure of our application. So let's save this file. And before doing anything here, let's go to package.json and change the scripts here. Let's say that we want to have scripts for development and then a script to be able to start our application. So to be able to start our application, we want to have Node. We want to use Node, not Nodemon. And we want to say Node and provide the name of our file, which will be index.js. And then for local development, we want to say Nodemon index.js. So let's save this file. And now if we say npm run dev, oops, I wrote it incorrectly, as you can see. So let's clear our terminal. So now if I say npm run dev, as you can see, Nodemon is working. Nodemon is in charge of what's going on. And you see server is listening on port 5000. And now if I open the URL, which will be localhost 5000, I should see this message. So let's do it. So as you can see here, I have hello world. Great. But let's say that I want to change the path here. Let's say that it will be, for example, about. So let's save it. And as you can see, server is listening again and Nodemon has restarted. And now if I refresh the page, as you can see, cannot get because this route doesn't exist. But if I go to about, as you can see, I have hello world. I think that now you have a better understanding of what we have right here. Great. And now what I suggest to do is to open pgAdmin. So as you can see here, I have pgAdmin. So we will use pgAdmin, a popular graphical tool for managing PostgreSQL databases. So this will let us see our databases and tables being created. So here we're gonna create a database using the pgAdmin itself. I mean, without writing SQL code. But we're gonna use SQL code when we're gonna create a table. So you will see it yourself. So by default, when you install it, you will see this. And by default, you will have Postgres database. But we're gonna create a new one. So let's right click databases, create, then database. And let's give it a name. We want to say todo db. Okay. And let's click save. Great. As you can see, now we have todo db. It is our database that we have just created. But if we go to schemas, we will have public, and inside this public, you will see tables. But right now we don't have any tables. So let's right click tables, and then we want to say query tool. And from here, we can write actual SQL commands to create a table. So let's do it. So for that, let's say create table, and then let's give it a name. It will be todo. Then we want to say todo underscore ID, then serial and primary key. So what does it mean? So serial here, it's an auto-incrementing integer. PostgreSQL automatically assigns a unique ID 1, 2, 3 to each new to-do. So it's perfect for a primary key. And here we have primary key. It's a unique identifier for each row. No to-dos can have the same to-do ID, okay? So again, in a nutshell, serial, it's an auto-incrementing integer, and primary key is a unique identifier for each row. Okay, and then let's say that we want to have description property, and let's say that it will be varchar 255, and let's say that it can't be null. So let's say not null. So let's say not null. So here we have varchar 255. It's a string of a variable length with a max of 255 characters. Not null means this field is necessary. It means that it cannot be null. You always have to provide description. And then we want to have one more property. it will be completed. And it will be Boolean, its type will be Boolean, and by default, it will be false. So it's a true or false value. By default, a new to-do is not completed and it will always be equal to false. And now let's click execute script. And now, as you can see, we have query returned successfully, but we still don't see it. So let's right click to do db and let's click refresh. And now, as you can see, we have a table called to do, and we have the following columns, which are to do ID, description, and completed. Great, we have created our database and we have created our table with 3 columns. Great. Now let's get back to the code. Okay, let's close our terminal, and now we have created our database, and now we need to be able to connect to it to be able to work with it. So for that, let's create a file called db.js, and here let's do the following. Let's import the pool class from pg. So here we want to create a new pool. A pool manages multiple client connections. Why a pool? Opening a new connection for every request is slow, and a pool keeps connections open and reuses them, which is much more efficient. So as I said, we need to be able to connect to our database. So let's say that we want to have const pool will be equal to new pool. And now if I hover over, you can read it, but I'm not gonna spend time on it. Okay. And now let's provide everything correctly here without any mistakes. Great. Now we need to define the following. We want to have user, and it will be equal to Postgres. So in my case, user is equal to Postgres and password is also equal to Postgres. In your case, it may be different. How do you know your user value and your password value? So when you install pgAdmin tool, you will be asked to provide your username and your password. And when I configured my pgAdmin tool, I provided this username and this password. So that's why I say Postgres and Postgres. In a nutshell, to be able to get these values, you need to remember them when you do installation. And then we want to have host property, which will be equal to localhost. We say localhost because the database is running on our local machine. And then port, by default, again, it is 5432. So it is the default port PostgreSQL listens on. And then we need to provide the database name, which is in our case is to do db. Great. And now we want to export the pool object by saying export default pool. And we're going to use it in our routes. Okay, so let's save this file. Great. Now we have index.js, db.js, and we have created our database and a table. That's great. Now let's create a new folder inside backend folder called routes. And inside this folder, we want to have the following file, which will be todos.js. And in this file, we want to define the API endpoints, the specific URLs that our frontend can talk to, okay? And each endpoint will correspond to a CRUD operation. And here, let's do the following. Let's import router from Express. So let's see router from Express. And we also want to import our pool object from a file called db.js. So we want to import our database connection. And now let's say const router will be equal to router. We want to create a new router object. So that's why we do it. And now we want to be able to create a new to-do. So let's say create a new to-do. And then we can say router.post. The method will be post method. And the path will be the root path of this route. And we want to say that it will be asynchronous because talking to a database is an operation that takes time, and we don't want to block the entire server while we wait for the database to respond. So that's why we say asynchronous. And here we have request object and response object. As I have said earlier, request is what comes to us from our client and response is what we respond to this request. Okay, and let's say that here we want to do the following. Let's say that we want to have try and catch blocks. And in case of some errors, we can show the error in the message and return response with status code 500 and send this error, which is server error. Okay. And then we want to do the following. We want to destructure the following properties from our client. So that's why here we're going to have requests. So we want to destructure description. So let's say description. And also we want to destructure the completed property. So we will take these two fields from our client. So that's why here we have request.body. Okay. Now let's create a new variable called new to do will be equal to await pool.query. Okay, so what does it mean? Now to be able to talk to the database, we need to use pool.query method. Okay, and inside we want to have the following. We want to say insert into to do, which is the name of our table, right? So that's why here we have to do. It is the name of our table, then description and completed properties, and the values are these $sign and 1 and $sign and 2 and returning in this star. So what does it mean? So here $1 and $2 are called parameterized queries. So this is the most important security practice here. So it prevents SQL injection attacks. So instead of splicing variables directly into the string, we use placeholders. Okay, so here again we say insert into to do. It is a command that tells that we want to insert some values into this table, and we want to insert values in the following columns. The columns are description and completed, and then values. But as I said, we do not send values directly, like saying description or completed. Instead of that, we say $sign and 1 and $sign and 2. So it is a security practice. And then here we have returning and this star. So returning and this star is a PostgreSQL feature. After the insert is done, it tells PostgreSQL to return the entire record of the newly created to-do. This is very convenient because we can immediately send it back to the front end. Okay, and also here we want to say the following. Here we want to have description and then completed. But when we're gonna create a to-do, we will not provide completed field immediately, right? So for that we can say here we want to have description, and for the second value we want to say either completed or false. Okay, so that's why we need to say false. So because it will be undefined when we're gonna just create it, right? So it will be for the first column, but for the second column, which is completed, we will send either completed or false. And I can immediately say that it will be false because when we just create a to-do, it will be false by default. Okay, so let's close it by providing a closing parenthesis. Okay, and then if everything was successful, we can send a response back to the front end. For that, we can say response.json new to-do .rows, and we want to have the first and only element, so that's why we say rows at 0. So here response.json, it will convert the provided data into JSON format and sends it. And here we have new to do .rows. It will contain an array of the rows returned by the query. Since we inserted only one to do, we want the first and only element, so that's why here we have 0. Great. And in case of some errors, as I have said, we can show the error in the message and return this response. Great, guys. Now we have created a route to be able to create a new to-do. So now what I suggest to do is to save this file and then set up our index.js file correctly so that everything will work correctly. And then I want to say that I want to test this route in Postman, then I want to write some commands in pgAdmin and then come back here and create functionality for other operations, which will be delete, get all to-dos, and update. But right now, I want to test this route, okay? So for that, we can do the following. So for that, first of all, we need to export this router. So let's say export default router. So let's save it. And now let's go to index.js file, and here we need to make some changes. So first of all, here, let's say that we want to say import course from course, and then let's import to-do routes from routes/todos.js. Don't forget to write .js here. And then we can remove this. So let's remove it, and let's say app.use course and app.use express.json. So by saying app.use course, we enable course so the React app can communicate with this server. And then we need to say app.use express.json. It will parse incoming JSON requests and puts the data inside request.body. Okay, inside request.body. But if we don't write express.json, we will not be able to get description and completed properties from request.body. So that's why we need to write app.use course and app.use express.json. And then what we need to do next is that we need to use our routes. So we need to say app.use and then /todos and to-do routes that we have just imported from this file. And here we have /todos. It means any request with /todos will be handled by to-do routes. Okay, and that's it, guys. So let's save this file and let's open our Postman to be able to test only this one route. So let's do it. Okay, guys, here let's click new, click HTTP. So we need to use it to build REST APIs. So we need to test our HTTP API with an HTTP request. So let's click HTTP. And actually, I think that we just need to create a new collection, okay? So that it will be easier for us to manage our requests. So let's create a new collection instead of that. And let's close this one, which is untitled. And for this new collection, let's give it a name. And I will say PERN-to-do-app. And inside this collection, we can click this button to add a new request. And the method will be post. And here we need to provide the path, which will be http://localhost:5000. And now we need to go inside body, then raw. And here we need to provide description and completed fields. So let's say description and completed. So let's say that it will be false. And for the description, let's say create a presentation. Okay, and now let's click send. As you can see, we have an error. Let's find out why. It is because here we need to say to-dos, right? Because as I have said, here inside index.js, any request which will start with to-dos will be handled by to-do routes. So we need to say /todos, okay? So let's get back to Postman and let's click send again. Now, as you can see, we have to-do ID, description, and completed properties. That's great, guys. It means that we have done everything correctly so far. So let's go inside pgAdmin, and to be able to see our to-do, let's say select everything from to-do table. And it should give us all the rows and all the columns. So let's click execute script. And now, as you can see, we have to-do ID, we have description, and we have completed property. That's great, guys. So let's get back to the code. So let's go to todos.js, and here we need to have functionality for all the CRUD operations. Right now we have only for create a new to-do. Okay, so now let's say that we want to be able to get all to-dos, and in this case the method will be get, and the path will still be the same. It will be the root path of this route. Okay, and what do we want to have inside? Inside, let's say that we want to use try and catch block. In case of some errors, we want to have this message in the console and this response. And then here we can create a new variable called all to dos will be equal to pull.query and this command, which I have just written inside pgAdmin. And after that, we want to send all the to dos back by saying all to dos.rows. So this will return us all the rows. And we're gonna test this route and the following routes a bit later. And now let's create a route to be able to update a to-do. So let's say update a to-do, and the method in this case will be put. So let's say router.put, and then we can say that the path will be /:id. Why do we need to say /:id? So in this case, it is a dynamic route parameter. And the colon tells Express that ID is a variable. And as you remember, each to-do has a unique ID. So it means that it varies, right? So that's why it has to be a variable. It means that the endpoint will look like /todo/5 or /todo/10. Those will be the IDs. And in this case, we can remove it. And then we can say, we shouldn't even create a variable here. We can say that we don't want to have this variable. And here we have ID, what it does. So this uses object destructuring to extract the ID from request.params. So it basically means that we want to have, for example, 5. If here we will have 5, the ID in this case will be 5. If it will be 6, here we also want to have 6. So by saying const id request.params, we just want to get access to this unique ID. Then we need to destructure description and completed properties from request.body from our client. Okay. And then we have the SQL query, which is update to do. So we want to say update command, then the name of our table. And then here we have set description to be equal to this, completed to be equal to this $, and where to do ID is equal to $sign and 3. And then we want to say returning and this star. So again, here in order to prevent SQL attacks, we use these placeholders. But in this case, you can already see that instead of this $, we will have description. Instead of this $, we will have completed. And instead of this $, we will have ID. So we just use placeholders, and here are the values that will be used instead of these placeholders. So we want to say that we want to update the to-do table with the following data. So we say set description to be equal to this description, and we will get this description from our client. So whatever our client types here, we want to update our existing to-do with this description and with this completed property. But how do we know which to-do to update? So that's why we say where to-do ID is equal to this ID. Again, we get this ID from request.params. So we need to update exactly the to-do which is being updated. Okay. And then we can say response.json, and we can say to-do was updated. Or maybe someone really wants to see that it was updated, right? So for that, we can actually say const updated to do will be equal to awaits pull.query, and then we can really provide this updated to do. And the last but not least, let's create a functionality to be able to delete a to do. Again, in this case, we need to define what kind of to do we need to delete. So that's why here we have ID, and here we want to have try and catch block. And in case of some problems, we can say that we can show this error in the console, and in the response, we can also send this error. And again, we will get this ID from request.params, and then we have this SQL query which says delete from the name of our table where to do ID is equal to this ID. Okay, this is a placeholder and this is a value. Great. So let's save this file. And now, guys, we have functionality to be able to do CRUD operations. Now let's do full testing in Postman. So let's go to Postman. So here we have a functionality to be able to create a to-do. So let's create one more to-do. Let's say read a book, and again let's leave it false. So let's click send, and here we have it. So let's save this request by pressing Ctrl and S. And as you can see here, it is post as well. The method is post, and let's rename it. Let's say that it will be create a to-do. Now let's create a request to be able to get all the to-dos. So the method has to be get, and the path is correct here. And here we don't need to provide anything. So let's click send. And as you can see, we have 2 to-dos. Great. Let's rename it to be get all to-dos. And let's save this request by pressing Ctrl and S. Let's create a new request, which will be for updating a to-do. So let's say update a to-do. Then the method has to be, first of all, let's get the path, and the method has to be put. Let's go to body, and here we need to provide the ID of a to-do that we need to update. So here, let's say that we want to update this to-do. So here I need to say 2. And let's say that the completed field will be true. And let's say that we want to have read a book on finances. Okay. So remember, guys, here when a to-do ID is 2, we have read a book, just read a book, and completed, which is false. Now I will click send. We have an error. Okay, let's find out why. So now I just opened my terminal, and here we have this message: cannot destructure property description of request.body as it is undefined. Oh, that's it, guys. Here, as you can see, we have text, but we need to say JSON. Okay, so as you can see now it is orange. So if we say text, as you can see it is white, but if I click JSON, it is orange, and now everything should be correct. So let's click send. And as you can see, it is updated. So we have read a book on finances and completed, which is true. To make it clear for a client, we can also send a message which will say the to-do was updated. So let's do it. So for that, let's find this route. And here we can have the following object. Here, let's say message to-do was updated. And we want to have to-do property, which will be equal to updated to-do.rows at 0. So let's save this file and try one more time. So now let's see that this time it will be read. So here let's say read an interesting book. Okay, so let's click send. As you can see, we now also have this message. So now if I click send one more time, we shouldn't see this old version. So let's click send. And as you can see, now we have new data. Great. And also let's create a new request to be able to actually, let's save this one so that here we will have the correct method. So let's save this request, and here we have put. And now let's come here, and here we need to say that it will be delete a to-do. And here let's take this path, and the method has to be delete. And let's actually create one more to-do. Let's say that we want to have go to the park, and let's click send. And let's say go to the zoo, and let's click send. And now let's say that we want to delete. Let's actually get all the to-dos. And let's say that we want to delete, for example, the third one. Okay. So let's provide the ID, and let's click send. And now we only have this message. And now if I say get all to-dos again, we only have 3 to-dos. Okay, let's save this request and let's save this request. And now let's go to pgAdmin. Now if I run this command one more time, let's see what we're gonna have. As you can see, we only have 3 to-dos. That is great, guys. So that's it for backend. Now let's do the front-end part. So for that, let's open our terminal one more time and let's create one more terminal and let's go to the front-end folder and let's say npm create vid at latest and dot, so that we will not have any additional folders. We will only have front-end folder, and inside that folder we will manage our front-end. So let's press enter, and here let's select a framework, which will be React, then JavaScript, and now let's write npm install. And now let's install the following dependencies, which will be Axios. It is a library for making HTTP requests, and then React icons, which will provide us beautiful icons. Okay, so let's press enter and install them. Okay, now it's time to connect Tailwind CSS to our project. So for that, we can visit their official website. Okay, so here let's click get started, and we can skip the first part because it is already done, and let's copy this command and paste it in our terminal. Okay, now we need to make some changes inside vid.config.js file. So let's copy this, and inside vid.config.js file, let's paste it right here, and let's copy Tailwind CSS, and inside this plugins array right next to React, we can see Tailwind CSS. Save this file, and let's copy this, and we want to add an import to our CSS file that will import Tailwind CSS. So inside source folder, we can find a file called index.js, and let's remove everything that we have here and replace it with this import. So let's save it. And now we can delete this app.css because we don't need it. And let's close the tabs that we are not using. And we can also close this folder. Okay, now if we go to app.jsx, we have this boilerplate code that we don't need. So let's remove everything that we don't need. And here let's say a div, and let's say PERN Todo App. Let's save it. And also we want to have the same title inside index.html. So let's change it. So let's save it, and only now let's say npm run dev to start our frontend. Let's open it. And as you can see, we have PERN Todo App. Now I will split my screen, and let's close our terminal, and let's close the tabs that we don't need. And now we can focus completely on our front-end part. So let's do it. Okay, so here let's say that to this div we want to apply the following styles. And actually let's close this explorer, and let's say that we want this div to take all the height. So we want to say that it will be min height screen, so it will take all the visible height of the screen. And then let's say that background color will be gray 800, and let's say that we want to place this text right in the center. So for that we can see flex, justify will be center, and items will be center. But now if I save this file, it will be very difficult for us to see this text, and for now I will say that text will be white. So let's save it, and we see it better. And also we can say that padding will be 4, so it will be more responsive. Then we can wrap this text inside h1 tag, and let's apply the following styles. Let's say that text will be 4XL, font will be bold, and let's say that, yeah, I think that that's it for now. So let's save it. Okay, and we want to have this h1 tag inside a div, and that div will contain both this h1 tag and a form. So let's wrap this h1 tag inside a div. And as I said, this div will also contain a form. So to this div, we can apply the following styles. Let's say that background color will be gray 50 and it will be rounded to XL. So if we hover over, as you can see, it is 16 pixels. So sometimes if you get confused when you work with Tailwind CSS, you can just hover over and you will get a better understanding of what's going on. Okay, so it will be rounded to XL, and let's add some shadow. It will also be, it will be shadow XL, and let's say that width will be full and max width will be large, and we can add some padding which will be 8. Now let's see what we have. As you can see, now it is difficult for us to see this text, so I can remove this style and let's save it, and here we go. And now to this h1, we can see that text color will be gray 800. So let's save it. Okay, now it is not black, it is gray 800. Great. And now inside this form, we want to have the following input. Type will be text and its value has to be description. So let's actually define some states that we're going to use right here. So let's create a state for description. So let's say set description and let's import use state from React. Then we need a state for all the to-dos. Then we need a state for a to-do which is being edited. So let's say edit to-do, set edit to-do, and by default it will be null. And then we want to have a state for a to-do's text for edited text. So let's say edited text. So the difference here, edit to-do is the actual to-do which is being edited, and then edited text is the text of a to-do which is being edited. Okay, that's the difference. So let's come back to this input. Type will be text, value will be description. Then on change, we want to get access to this event object, and then we want to say set a description to whatever we type. So we say event.target.value for that. And for the placeholder, we can say what needs to be done. Okay, so here guys, I actually use styles which I already covered in my video called PERN Todo App. But in this case, it is a different project, but I think that for the front-end part, it is acceptable. And yeah, that's it. I already used these styles, most of these styles in my other video. Okay, so let's continue. And let's say that this input should be required. So let's actually save it and see what we have. So here we have this, what needs to be done. We can remove this action because we don't need it. And we can apply some styles to this input. So let's do it. Let's say that width will be full and outline will be none. And let's say that we want to have some padding. Horizontally it will be 3, vertically it will be 2. Text will be gray 700, and the color of a placeholder will be gray 400. So let's save it. Okay, now as you can see, when I click it, I don't see an outline, but if I remove this style and if I select it, as you can see, I have this outline, but I don't want to see that outline. And now it is much better. Okay, and now I also need to have a button to be able to add a task. So let's create that button. I will say button, add task, and let's apply the following styles. Let's say that background color will be blue 500. On hover, the background color will be blue 600, and text will be white. Padding horizontally will be 4, vertically it will be 2. It will be rounded medium, and font will be medium. And when we hover over, we want to have cursor pointer style. So let's save this file. And now we have this add task. I want to have them in one line. So for that, I need to come to this form tag and let's apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be flex and items will be center. Let's save it. Okay. And let's say that gap will be 2 and we can give some shadow, which will be small, and some border. Okay. Let's give some padding, which will be 2. Let's say that it will be rounded, which will be large, and margin bottom, which will be 6, because under this form, we're gonna have our to-dos, and to this h1 tag, we can also give margin bottom, which will be 8. Great. So as you can see, now input is taking all the width, like this button doesn't even have some space. So to fix that, we can say that it will be flex 1, and now it looks much better. Okay, so if I remove this flex 1, for example, as you can see, task, this button isn't pushed to the right, it is right here. So I say flex 1 so that this input will take all the available space, and also this button will also have space. So this input will take all the available space, but not the full width like it was previously, not like full width, okay? Not like this. So it is a more responsive approach. Okay, now we need to create a functionality to be able to add task. So let's do it. So for that, I can create a function called onSubmitForm. Why? Because we want to use that function when we submit this form. So let's say onSubmitForm, and it has to be asynchronous. And also we want to prevent the default behavior of a page when the page is refreshing, but we want to prevent that behavior. We don't want our page to refresh after submitting a form. So that's why we say event.prevent default behavior. Then we can have try and catch block. And in case of some errors in the console, we can show the error message. And then we need to say await Axios. By the way, let's import Axios from Axios. Okay, here we need to see await Axios dot, and then we need to provide the method, which will be post, then our path, which is HTTP localhost 5000, and the endpoint, which is to-dos. And in the body, we want to provide the following. So we need to provide our description and complete it. But as I said, when we just create it, the completed field is false. So we can say that completed will be false. Okay. And then it will be something like this. So let's actually come up with an idea what we want to have here. Let's say draw a picture. Okay. And then after clicking this button, we want to reset this field. So for that, we can say set description to be empty. Okay. So let's take this function, and when we submit this form on submit event, we need to use this function. So let's save this file, and now due to our changes, the page has refreshed. Now let's come up with an idea. Let's say call my friends, and let's click add task. It is gone. Let's check it in pgAdmin. Let's execute this script, and as you can see, here we have this to do. Great. Now we need a function to be able to get to-dos. So let's create a functionality for that. Let's say const get to-dos. It will be a synchronous function, and here we can have try and catch block again. In case of some problems, we can show the error in the console, and we can say const res, which is a shortcut for response, will be equal to await Axios dot get method and our path, and then we want to set our to-dos to be equal to this response data. So let's do it, and then in the console we can also show this response to data, and we want to use this function using useEffect hook. So let's say useEffect, and here let's say get to-dos, and the dependency array will be empty arrays. So this useEffect hook will run on every render of our component. So let's save this file, and now let's open our DevTools, And as you can see, here we have our to-dos. Great. That's really great. Okay, so let's close it. Now let's display our to-dos right under this form. So for that, right under this form, we can create a div. And let's do the following. We need to check if we even have to-dos, right? So we can say to-dos.length is equal to 0. So if we don't have any to-dos at all, in this case, we want to do something. But if we have something, in this case, we also want to do something. So if we don't have any to-dos at all, we can show this text which says no tasks available, add a new task. But if we have, we need to do the following. Let's say that we want to map through to-dos by saying to-dos.map, and here we want to have to-do, and then we want to have a div. For each to-do, we want to have a div. And using, for example, a span tag, we can show to-do.description, the actual to-do. So let's save it. And as you can see, here we have all our to-dos. Great. So let's add something here. Let's say play football tomorrow. Let's click add task. And we don't immediately see it right here because we should call this function after submitting a form. So let's call it right here. So let's save it. Now, if we refresh the page, we have it. So let's add one more. Let's say watch a movie with my friends. Let's click add task and we immediately see it right here. Okay, now in front of this text, we want to have a button to be able to click it and to be able to mark it as completed or uncompleted. So for that, let's create a button and let's apply styles to it. Let's say that height will be 6, width will be 6, border will be 2, and it will be rounded full. So it will be a circle. Let's say that it will be flex, and items will be center, and justify will be center. Let's save it. And as you can see, here we have a circle. And based on whether to-do is completed or not, we can apply some styles. So we need to apply some conditional styles. For that, we need to use curly braces here, and we need to use backsticks. Okay, and now we can write a $sign and open curly braces, and we need to say if to-do is completed. So if to-do is completed, we want to apply these styles. If not, we want to apply these styles. So if to-do is completed, we want to say background color to be green 500 and border will be green 500 and text will be white. If not, we need to say border to be gray 300 and on hover it will be border blue 400. And then if to-do is completed, here we want to show the following. We need to use an icon here. So we need to see to-do completed, and only if to-do is completed, we want to show this icon, which is MD outline done, and we should get it from React icons. And let's say that its size will be 16. So let's see if we imported it or not. No, we didn't. So we need to import it. So let's import MD outline from React icons and let's save our file. As you can see, one of these guys is marked as completed because as you can see here we have read an interesting book on finances, and it is true. If I'm not mistaken, we did it in Postman and here we have it. It is marked as completed. Great. And here you may wonder why we have text white. If I remove it, this icon will not be white. So let's save it and let's provide a quote here. So as you can see, it is black. So that's why we need to say text white. And it is white. Great. I want to have this button and this text on one line. For that, I need to come to this div and say flex items to be center, and let's give some gap. Horizontally it will be 4. So let's save it. Great. And let's give some space between these to-dos. So let's go to this div and let's see flex direction will be column and gap will be 4. Great. Now it looks much better. And if I hover over, we see this good effect. Great. And also after this text, here we want to have icons to be able to edit and to be able to delete it. So let's also provide them. For that, I can create a div and I can have a button, and the icon that I want to use here, it will be md mode edit outline. Okay. And let's make sure that yes, it is imported, and one more icon to be able to delete. So for that, we need to say fa trash, and we should import it. So let's import it from React icons, and it should come from React icons / fa6. Okay, so let's save it. And as you can see, we have 2 icons. Let's give some styles to them. First of all, to this div which contains these 2 buttons, let's see that it will be flex and gap between them will be 2 horizontally. Okay, now to this button, let's apply the following styles. Let's say that padding will be 2 and text will be blue 500. On hover, text will be blue 700, and it will be rounded large, and on hover, background color will be blue 50, and the duration within it should happen will be 200. So let's save it. As you can see, we have this nice effect. Okay, and we need to apply some styles to this icon as well. So let's actually accept these styles and see how it looks. It looks fine. We can leave it as it is. Okay guys, and now when we click this icon, we need to understand that this particular to-do is being updated. So we need to keep track of that. So for that, we need to find this icon, which is right here. And when we click this button, let's say when we click this button, we want to say set editing to do to be to-do _ID, but looks like we don't have editing to do. Yes, we need to say editing to do set editing to do, and also we need to say set edited text to be equal to do.description. Okay, and we have an error here, so let's deal with it. Great. Okay guys, so now we need to do the following. So when we click, for example, this icon, we should show the interface to be able to edit this particular to-do. So for that, first of all, let's cut this div and create one more div. And inside this div, we can paste it. And to this div, let's see that it should have a unique key, which will be to-do_ID. And for the class name, we can say that padding bottom will be 4, for example. And now we need to do the following. We need to understand if editing to do is equal to this to-do.to-do-ID. We need to show something here. If not, we need to show something here. And actually, I should have it after this div. Okay, so it's important to be careful right here. So let's cut this div. And let's actually create a div for now, so that we will not get confused. And the same here. Okay, the errors are gone now. Let's paste our div right here, and we can remove this div that we don't need. Okay, here for now, let's say hello, and let's save this file. Okay, so now I want to have this text in the center and push these icons to the right. And for that, I need to create one more div here. So let's cut this and create one more div. And let's paste it right here. And to this div, let's apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be flex, items will be center, and justify will be between. But our styles aren't applied. It is because we need to review our structure. So inside this div, we should only have button, and description. So we should remove this div from here and put it after this div. So let's save this file. And as you can see, now they are pushed to the right. Great. Now, if I click this icon, for example, here I see only this text instead of the task, because here we did it like this. So when we click this icon, we set editing to do to be equal to ID of this current to do. And when we do mapping, of course, there will be a matching, like this current to do's ID will be equal to editing to do, because we map through all our to do's. And then when we click some of these to do's, we say editing to do to be equal to this to do's ID. And where do we get this ID from? We get it from here. And of course, there will be this matching. And that's why we see this hello. I think that is clear to you. So now, if editing to do is equal to this to do's ID, we need to have the following. Inside of this div, we want to show an input. Its type will be text and the value will be edited text. So let's save it. As you can see, here we have this value. If I click go to the zoo, here I also have go to the zoo. Great. And on change, we need to say event object, and we need to say set edited text to be equal to event.target.value, and we can apply some styles. So let's quickly apply some styles. Let's say that padding will be 3. It will be border, which will be its width will be 1 pixel, rounded will be large, border will be gray 200, outline will be none, and when it is on focus, ring will be 2, and focus, and when it is on focus, the color of the ring will be 300, text will be gray 700, and let's say that shadow will be inner. So let's save this file, and as you can see, when it is focused, we have this nice effect. Great. Then after this input, we should have a div where we want to show buttons. Let's create 2 buttons. Here we want to have md outline done to save it, and a button to cancel our action. So let's say IO close. Let's make sure that they are imported. So we need to have md outline done. Oh, it is already imported. And we need to import IO close. So let's save it. And let's, for example, edit this one. And here we have our icons. Okay, first of all, let's apply some styles to these icons. So to this button, let's see that I want to apply padding. Horizontally will be 4, vertically it will be 2. Let's actually accept it and see how it looks. It looks cool, yeah. And to this button, let's also apply some styles. Let's accept it. It looks nice as well. But let's make it to be gray. Yeah, it looks even better. So when I click this button to cancel it, I need to do the following. I need to say on click, set editing to do to be null. Here I need to have a callback function. Okay, so let's save it. So now I will click it. And since editing to do is null, this statement also becomes false. I mean, there is no to do whose ID is equal to editing to do. So that's why we don't see an option to edit it anywhere. Okay, now let's click this one and now we can edit it. Let's write something like this. But now if I click, nothing is happening. So let's cancel it for now. So let's choose it one more time and let's give some styles to this div. Let's say that we want its display to be flex and items will be center and gap will be 3 horizontally. So let's save it. It looks nice. And to this input, again, we can do the same trick so that it will take all the available space. And it really looks nice. Okay, so now we need to implement functionality so that when we click this button, we need to update our to-do. So let's do it. For that, let's create a function called save edit. So let's say save edit. And of course, it has to be synchronous. And this function will accept an ID. And then we can use try and catch block And in case of some errors, we can show them in the console. So let's accept this. So we need to say await access, then the method which is put. Then we need to provide the full correct path and this variable. So after this slash, it is a variable, as I said earlier. Then for the description field, we say edited text, and we do not provide a field for completed because we want to mark our tasks as completed or not using this circle, okay? And then we need to say set editing to do to be null, edited text to be empty, and then we can call this get to do's function. So let's take this function, and when we click this button, we should call it, and we need to pass an ID here. So let's say save edit, and we need to pass an ID, which will be to-do underscore ID. Okay, so let's save this file, and now let's say call my friends tomorrow. Let's click this button, and as you can see, it is right here. It is on the bottom. Let's refresh it, and it is still right here. Let's see it in pgAdmin. So let's execute this script, and here we have call my friends tomorrow, but for the completed field we have default, but it should be false rather than default. So let's see it inside our routes. So here when we update a to-do, oh, we didn't handle it here. So if completed isn't provided, we need to say completed or false. Okay, so let's say or false. So let's save it, and let's, for example, update this one. Let's click this button and see it in pgAdmin. So let's execute the script, and now it is false. Great. So now we can create a to-do, we can update it, and now let's implement functionality to be able to delete a to-do. For that, let's create a function called delete to-do, and also it's gonna accept an ID of a to-do that we want to delete. Then let's say try, and let's actually accept this code, and then here we need to filter out the to-do that has been deleted. For that, we need to say set to-dos to be equal to to-dos.filter. So we say to-do, and we want to keep all the to-dos whose ID isn't equal to this ID which is incoming. So first of all, we delete it in our backend, and then in our front end, we show only the existing to-dos. Great. So let's take this function, and when we click this button, we need to provide an ID of a to-do that we want to delete. And let's say that I want to delete, for example, this one, which is create a presentation. So let's click this button, and it is gone. Let's go to pgAdmin and see it. So this create a presentation should be gone, and it is gone. Great. Now let's refresh the page, and as you can see, everything is still correct. Now we need to implement functionality for marking a to-do as completed or not completed. So let's do it. For that, we can create a function called toggle completed. So let's say const toggle completed. It will be synchronous, and it's gonna accept an ID. So let's use this try and catch block, and in case of some errors, we can show the error in the console. And now we need to find a to-do, first of all, that we need to update. So we need to say to-do, to-dos.find. So we just find one to-do whose ID is equal to this incoming ID, okay? And then we need to say await access.put. Then we provide the ID, and then we provide a description of a current to-do and complete it. So we make it to be opposite. So if it was true, it will be false. If it was false, it will be true. And then again, on the back end, we handle it like this. And on the front end, we can do the following. So let's say set to-dos, and we need to map through our to-dos. And here, basically, what we need to do is that we need to find out if to-dos ID is equal to this incoming ID. If it is true, we need to keep all the properties of a to-do like they were before. So we need to keep them as they are, no problems. but only we need to change one field which is completed. So we change it to be opposite. Okay, we keep all the fields as they are and change only this field. And then if todo.todo_id isn't equal to this incoming ID, we just keep todo as it was without any problems. So let's take this function and we need to find where we need to use it. So here we have our button, and let's say that when we click it, we need to pass the ID of this to do. So let's save it. And now let's say that play football tomorrow should be marked as complete. This one as well, this one as well, this one as well. So let's refresh the page and all of them marked as completed, and let's see it in pgAdmin. So let's execute the script and all of them are marked as completed. That's great. And now we need to handle a case when a task can be too long. Okay, let's click add task. And as you can see, now we have overflowing. So to prevent this overflowing, we can say overflow to be hidden. And now it is hidden. But at the same time, as you can see, this circle, like it is gone. It is like squished. To prevent this, we can say flex shrink to be 0. Like by applying this style, we say that this circle should never be smaller than its original size. So let's save it. And now, as you can see, it is as it is. Great. Now let's just delete this task because we don't need it. I just showed it for testing purposes. Okay guys, and now when I refresh the page, as you can see, we don't immediately see these to-dos. It takes some milliseconds before we see them, because when I refresh the page, as you can see, we see some kind of blinking. So we don't immediately see these to-dos because it takes some time for them to be displayed here, okay? And it means that we can show that these to-dos are being loaded. So for that, we can create a state. Let's say that we want to have a state for loading, and by default, it will be false. So let's say that it will be false. And also we can have one more state for error handling, so that we want to show our errors right on the page. Okay. And now when we fetch our to-dos, we can say that loading will be true. So let's say that set loading will be true. And also we want to reset errors if there were some errors. Then in the catch block, if there were some errors, we can also show this error by saying failed to fetch to-dos. And then we need a state when loading will become false again. So for that, we can say finally and set loading to be false again. Okay, so now when loading is true, we need to show some info for a user so that it will be convenient for him. So for that, we need to come here and we need to say the following. So here we can say if loading is true, then here inside these parentheses, we want to show a div, and inside this div, we can have a p tag by saying loading tasks. So let's save it and check if everything is correct. So let's refresh it. For us, it's happening too fast, but we did everything correctly. And now if I give some classes to this div, let's say that min height will be screen, and let's say that background color will be, for example, this color. So let's save this file. And now if I refresh the page, you saw that we see this color. It means that we did everything correctly, but we get our tasks too fast. So that's why we see this behavior. If you don't like this experience, you can just remove this loading state and leave everything as it was. Okay. And now, since we have an error state, let's also show it on the page. After this h1 tag, we can say if error is true, then we want to show something here. We want to show a div with this error, and we can accept these styles. Okay. Now let's come to onSubmitForm function. And here, as you can see, we have this getToDos function, but instead of refetching data like this, instead of these excessive API calls, we can do something called optimistic updates. So optimistic updates are a pattern where you update the interface immediately as if an operation succeeded without waiting for the server response. So we're just being optimistic that the operation will succeed. And now here we can say, so we can remove this function, and here we can say set to-dos, but for that we need to have a response. So let's say const response will be equal to await. And now we can say set to-dos to be equal to, we want to keep all the previous to-dos as they are and add this one to them. So we want to keep all the previous to-dos as they are and add this new to-do to them. Okay. And in case of some errors, here we can reset the error. And now here, if we have an error in the catch block, we can show this text. Okay. Also, if description isn't provided, we can stop this function to make an API call. So for that, we can say if there is no description, we can just return, and this API call will not work. So if we hover over trim, you can read it yourself. Okay, so let's save it. And then when we save edit again, instead of calling this get-to-dos function, we can do the following. We can do an optimistic update, and for that we can say that const response will be equal to await access.put. And now let's say set to-dos, and we need to map our to-dos, and let's say the following. Here we want to have a to-do, and then we need to find if to-do.to-do underscore ID is equal to this ID. If it is true, then we want to keep the to-do as it is and only change the description field. Okay, so we just find the to-do that we need, and then we keep all the previous properties as they are and change only the description field with this edited text. And if this statement isn't true, we just keep the to-do as it was. And in case of some errors, we can say set error to be equal to fail to update to-do. And if there were some errors, we can reset them. Okay. And here we don't even need to have this variable since it isn't used, so we can remove it. Okay. Then when it comes to this delete to-do function, we can also set error to be null if there were some errors. And inside this catch block, if we run into a problem, we can say set error failed to delete to-do. And the same here. Okay, so let's save this file. Okay, we optimized our app.jsx file. Now we can also optimize our routes. So here we need to check if description field is provided. So after this destructuring, we need to check if there is a description or not. So if there is no description, we can say description is required, and we can return this response. Then when it comes to updating a to-do, also we should check if description is provided or not. Okay, then here we need to find out if to-do was found and updated. So here we say if updated to-do.rows.length is equal to 0, we can say to-do not found, and we can throw this error. Also, when it comes to deleting, we can create a variable called deleted to-do, and then it will be equal to await pull.query, and then we need to check if we really managed to delete or not. So again, if deleted to-do.row count rows.length, let's say rows.length is equal to 0, then it means that to-do not found and we didn't manage to delete it. And also here we need to say returning and this star, because only in this case we will be able to get the deleted row data. Okay, so let's save this file, and that should be it. I think that everything is correct. And now we can test it by adding one more to do. So let's say write a letter. So let's click this button, and it is right here. Let's, for example, change this one, and let's say play football tomorrow again, for example. Let's add it. And here it is. Let's refresh the page. So guys, I noticed that, for example, if I edit it, so take a look, now it is marked as completed. But now if I edit it and then click this button, it is updated and it is marked as completed. But now if I refresh the page, as you can see, it isn't marked as completed. And let's see it in our database. So let's execute the script. And as you can see, watch a movie with my friends again is false. And it would be better if it was marked as uncompleted as soon as I click this button, So for example, let's say again, and let's click this button. As you can see, it is still marked as completed. But now if I refresh the page, it is incompleted. So to prevent that behavior, we can say completed property to be false. So let's say that it will be false. Okay, now let's refresh the page and let's mark some of them as completed and refresh the page one more time. And now let's update, for example, this one. So let's remove it and let's update it. And as you can see, it was marked as completed and now it is not completed. Let's do the same with this one. Great. And let's refresh the page. Great. And now let's see it in our pgAdmin. So everything seems to be working. Okay, and also guys, I noticed that if, for example, I click edit and then I don't make any changes and click save edit, as you can see, it is not completed, but at the same time, the description is still the same. So to prevent that kind of situation, first of all, we need to find a to-do. So let's say const to-do will be equal to todos.find method. And then we find the to-do with this ID. Then we can say that we want to have a variable called trimmed text so that it will remove any leading and trailing whitespace and line terminator characters from a string. And then we need to check if current to-do description is equal to trimmed text. And here let's say current to-do. The name will be current to-do. And let's check if current to-do dot description is equal to trimmed text. If that's the case, then we want to say set editing null, set edited text to be empty, and we just want to return, so we will not make any additional API call. So let's save it. Okay, and now let's test it one more time. So here I have this task, and now I will just click it. And as you can see, it is still as it was. Let's refresh the page and let's try this one. Let's cancel it. Let's try one more time and it is as it was. Great. Okay, and now let's do the final testing. Let's add a new task. Let's mark it as completed. Let's change it. Now it isn't completed. Let's make it to be completed again and see it in our database. So let's execute the script and here it is. And now let's delete this task, refresh the page and see it in our database. And it is gone. So that's it guys. If you find this video at least a little helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you. I really appreciate it.